is Eric Carter-Landin. I'm the host and executive producer and creator of True Consequences Podcast. True Consequences is all about true crime in New Mexico. So it's a different look at true crime. It's an empathetic look because I've been fighting for justice for my baby brother for 36 years, and I understand what it's like to look for justice for your loved one. So I try to bring that empathetic lens to my stories.
So as you just mentioned, you have a personal link to true crime. If you don't mind, can you talk about that and how it's affected your family and continues to affect your family to this day?
Yeah, sure. Not sure how in depth you want me to go. It's kind of a long story, but essentially my parents separated when I was about 4, I think, maybe 5. And I had a baby brother named Jacob. He was 9 months old when he died. So my parents, when they separated, my mom had discovered that my dad was having an emotional relationship with another woman. And for her, that was the last straw because she had been essentially taking care of the kids while my dad was out traveling for work. He was a Pentecostal evangelist, so he traveled a lot. He was one of those like big tent revival guys. And he would leave us often without money or food and just really seemed to not really be aware of what was going on with my mom and us. And I remember my mom crying a lot during that time and being really upset and really stressed out. And we often had to rely on the kindness of strangers to make sure that we got fed. Yeah, a neighbor would often bring a box of food to the house and just drop it at the door and not say anything. And so because of those things, my mom was, when she found out he was connecting with this other woman, she was done. She wanted to leave Texas where we were living and go back to New Mexico where we're from. And at the same time, my dad's best friend, I'm not going to name him because I haven't named him at all. It's just not good for the case for me to do that. So I'm just going to call him John for now. So John was my dad's best friend. He started kind of trying to, at the time, we didn't realize that he was manipulating her, but he was manipulating my mom into being in a relationship with him. And so he leveraged his knowledge of what was going on with my parents because he was my dad's best friend to really prey on my mom when she was most vulnerable emotionally and even financially. She was pretty vulnerable at the time. So this man came in and he seemed like, the knight in shining armor that you would want, the person who's going to come and take care of your kids and, you know, be romantic for my mom. He, stepped in that father figure role for me. But at the same time, there were a lot of things that were happening to Jacob. He started to have bruises on his body. His behavior changed pretty dramatically. And nobody was really sure what was going on. My mom's boyfriend at the time blamed me for a lot of the things that were happening to Jacob and would even threaten me with violence if I didn't tell the story the way he wanted me to. So my mom had me sent to California to live with my dad, and at the same time started really pulling back on how much time Jacob was spending with her boyfriend because she started to suspect that there was something happening. And the thing about this person is my family knows this person. His dad married my parents. His sister married my mom's brother. His aunt is my godmother. So our families are very connected. This is not somebody that just came in off the street, that nobody knew anything about. My mom went to school with him. She went to church with him. They grew up together. They'd known each other their entire lives. And so for her, she never thought that he would be capable of that because the side of him that she always saw was the side that he portrays to everybody in public. But it's a completely different side from the person he is in private. And he hadn't really revealed that side of himself to my mom yet. So she starts to just out of caution, really pull back how much time Jacob is there. And there's one night where there's nobody else to watch Jacob, and it's an hour until she gets off of work. So her boyfriend has Jacob, and it's less than an hour. She's not off of work yet when she hears an ambulance driving by. And then her boyfriend runs into the grocery store where she was working in a panic, saying that Jacob was no longer breathing and he was unconscious. Jacob had severe head trauma. He had a hematoma in his head, his brain. His brain was swelling, his lungs were filling up with fluid, and they had to airlift him from Socorro General Hospital. Socorro is a small town about 75 miles south of Albuquerque. And they had to airlift him from there to Albuquerque to the University of New Mexico Hospital for emergency surgery. And he didn't make it. He died while they were operating on him. There's a lot of reasons why we think that my mom's boyfriend is the one responsible. Aside from the fact that he was the only one with Jacob that night, his behavior afterwards was very telling. When the doctor came to tell my mom and him that Jacob had died, the only thing that he said was, "This isn't looking good for me. This is going to look really bad for me. I can't believe this is happening to me." It was so strange that the doctor put it in the report and talked to the police about it, because he was concerned that this person was only concerned about themselves, had no concern for my mom, no concern for Jacob. And it's one of those horrible cases. He confessed to killing Jacob. We don't know what the confession was, because there's no record of it. There's no recording of it. There's no signed copy. There's no affidavit. There's nothing other than one little note in the case file that says he confessed. It's crazy. So, there's a lot more to the story. There's a lot of just subtle things. I don't really know that we have time for me to go into all of it. I have covered it several times. It's been covered on my show as well. But the way it's affected my family, it's been pretty substantial, I think, in every level of my family. My mom and I both have severe PTSD because of the things that happened to Jacob, but also the things that happened to us after Jacob died. So we're dealing with that trauma. It's a constant thing. It gets better with time and working on it, but it never fully goes away. And then there are things that always bring it back. So that's been hard. My grandmother kind of shut down after Jacob died and doesn't want to talk about Jacob, never wants his name mentioned, never wants to think about it, which was hard for us because we really wanted to keep his memory alive and we really wanted to not have his death be in vain. So we've had to fight against our own family, to advocate for Jacob's case. It's created some tension there. And then just the way people are on the internet, it doesn't make it any easier. When I first came out with the show and started telling Jacob's story, there was somebody who commented something that has stuck with me to this day. They said, "This is so stupid. He just wants to get rich off of his stupid dead brother." And as an indie podcaster, we're not getting rich doing this. The podcast is paying its bills, but I'm not making any money on it, and I don't really need to. That doesn't really matter to me. I'm just trying to make a difference in my brother's case and in my community.
So you said your brother was 9 months old when he had passed away.
Yeah.
I know that it was so long ago, but do you have any fond memories you have that stuck out to you with him?
Oh yeah. I'm very grateful to my mom because when Jacob died, I of course was devastated, and that was my first experience with death. Was my baby brother. I'm not super religious now, but I was when I was growing up because that's what my family was. And I prayed for Jacob. I prayed for him to be born, to have a brother. And my parents weren't trying to have a baby. It just happened. So he was my little miracle, that I had asked for. And I love that baby so much. He had so much personality for such a small person. he was fearless. He used to do crazy things. Um, we had this baby swing, and he loved, as it was one of those like wind up ones. And as it would go forward, he would grab the front legs of the swing. And then as it went backwards, the whole swing would fall on the ground. And the first time he did it, everybody panicked and freaked out and gasped and, ran over to check on him. He laid there cracking up. He thought it was the funniest thing that had ever happened to him. And he kept trying to do it. We had to move the swing against the wall so that he wouldn't fall all the way backwards, because he just kept trying to do that over and over again. He pulled all of the drawers out of the kitchen cabinets, and knives and forks and spoons were clattering all around on the floor. I ran into the kitchen to see what was going on, and he was just laughing. He thought it was hilarious. He was a daredevil, and his laugh was something that I can still hear today. It's the weirdest laugh I've ever heard in my life. It's kind of like if Eddie Murphy was a baby, and the way Eddie Murphy laughs, it was like that. Um, I have so many good memories of him, and I'm grateful to my mom, because when I was going through all that pain of losing him and grieving my brother, she told me that the thing I need to do is, every time I feel that, is to remember the good times, to think about the funny times, the happy times. And so I did that. And because of that, I have this very vivid memory of Jacob. I was able to keep that memory alive, even though I was super young.
Even though you were really young at the time, do you remember what you were feeling when he was rushed to the hospital, not knowing that he had passed away yet?
So I didn't know so this happened at like 7 p.m. My dad didn't tell me anything. So I went to bed. I didn't know anything. And I was woken up at like probably 3 or 4 in the morning by my dad. And he told me then that Jacob had went to the hospital and that he was in surgery, but he didn't tell me yet that he had died. I didn't find that out until I arrived in Albuquerque. But I remember being very upset, because I had been blamed for so long for hurting Jacob, for doing all these things to Jacob. So I thought that maybe I had done something. And I was interrogated by the police as soon as we got off the plane. And I don't think that they thought it was me. I don't think it was possible for me to fracture Jacob's skull. He was a huge baby. I was a small kid. He weighed 10 pounds when he was born. So I just don't think I would have had the strength to hurt him that way. And when he died, I wasn't there. Now, that's not to say that I couldn't have been jealous. It's possible I could have been jealous of Jacob. It's possible that I could have hit him. I don't remember doing that. The only evidence we have of that comes from the person who we suspect killed Jacob. And it's not really evidence, it's just him saying it. So I don't know that that's true, but I remember feeling very guilty. I remember being devastated that my brother was dead, and confused. I was very confused. I didn't really understand what was happening.
I know it was so long ago, but do you remember what any of the police officers were interrogating you about at the time?
So there's a record of that. Um, the police asked me if I had ever hit Jacob, and I said no. And they asked me if I knew who did, and I stayed quiet. I didn't say anything. I got really uncomfortable, according to the police officer. Um, and then they asked me if John ever hit me or hurt me, and I said no, but he always acts like he's going to. Um, and I remember he would raise his hand at me, and you know almost hit me, but he never quite got there. So those were the questions they asked me. They asked me if I thought that John was capable of hurting Jacob. I said I didn't know. So
Do you remember what life was like after your brother had passed away at home?
yeah, it was hell. Um, my mom left John after Jacob died because she didn't know what to believe. She was definitely suspicious of him. And then he kept trying to get her to talk to him. He kept trying to get her to be alone with him. And he told her the only place he wanted to meet her was at Jacob's grave, which I thought was really weird. I don't understand why somebody would do that to a grieving mom, but that's what he recommended. She didn't go, thankfully, because I think that that would have been bad for her. It's a very remote area. If he would have done anything to her, nobody would have heard her. So I'm glad she didn't do that. But he was consistently maintaining his innocence and essentially stalking my mom. I mean, he would leave letters on her car. He would give letters to her boss. He would, wherever he thought she would be, he would leave a letter for her. And I have all those letters still to this day. Um, and then one day he just said, I have to go take this lie detector test. Let me prove to you once and for all that it was an accident and that I didn't do anything. And so she said, okay. He's like, I'll go. You can take me up there and you'll see. They're going to let me out because I didn't do anything. So we took him to Santa Fe. He was there for 4 or 5 hours, probably, doing the polygraph. And he walked out. My mom asked him how it went. He said, fine, I passed. And we believed him because at that time in the 80s, if he would have failed that polygraph, he probably would have been arrested, right? At least that's what we thought. Turns out he did fail it. We just didn't know, and they didn't arrest him for it. I don't know why. I don't know what happened there, but my mom took that as a sign that he was innocent, that he had passed the test. And so she was like, okay, let's see what we can, let's see what can happen. Let's give this relationship a chance. And so they got together, they moved in together. And then he convinced her to marry him by saying that he had signed up for insurance at work and added her to the insurance, even though they weren't married, and said that they were married. And so in order to avoid going to jail, he had to marry her right away. At least that's what he told her. So they got married, and as soon as they got married, everything changed. He became very violent with her. He started to abuse me in various ways. It was about 3 years of just complete hell. I couldn't look at him without him accusing me of giving him dirty looks. And inevitably my mom would say, he's not giving you dirty looks, he's just looking at you. And then he would start punching her in the face. So I couldn't do anything. My mom couldn't do anything. It didn't matter what we did. Anything could set him off. You never knew what it was going to be. He constantly told my mom that the only way that she was leaving him was in a body bag. He strangled her multiple times. He threatened my life and my mom's life and told me that if I ever told anybody about the sexual abuse that he made me endure, that he would kill us both and nobody would ever find us. And then after my mom left him, he stalked us for another 4 years. He would come to my window every night and tell me that he was going to kill me. And I used to sleep under my bed because I was so afraid. It was hell, man.
Was he ever arrested or charged for anything that he did to you or your mother?
No. He was friends with the police. They played basketball every weekend. I'm not saying that that's why he didn't get arrested, but because I don't really know, but it's suspicious. I remember when my mom would call the police or the neighbors would call the police, and he would just be like, haha, she's crazy, bro. You know how women are. And then they would laugh and they would leave.
Was he friends with the same officers that were investigating your brother's death?
It's a small town. So the whole force played basketball with him. They all knew him. He worked for the county. He had the keys to every county office.
So what was the final straw in which your mother did finally leave him?
So she had no idea that I was being molested. I did not tell her. I didn't tell anybody because I was so scared that we were going to get killed. And he started grooming my 14-year-old cousin. He would call her at my grandparents' house and tell her that he thought she was beautiful and that he wanted to be in a relationship with her. but that nobody could know about it because they wouldn't understand. I mean, it's just like classic prototypical grooming. But he didn't know my cousin. He thought that she was going to be like me and my mom, very introverted, quiet, afraid of everything. She was not like that. She has a huge mouth, and she doesn't care who she says what about. Like she'll just blab whatever. And so she played the game with him because she knew what he was doing, because she's very smart. And she was like, "Oh yeah, tell me more, this and that." And then as soon as she hung up with him, she's like, "Grandma, John called me and he's telling me all this stuff." And then she called her mom and she called my mom and told everybody in the family. And I think if he would have known that about her, he probably wouldn't have targeted her, because she was not afraid of anything. And she had no reason to be. She didn't know what he was doing behind closed doors. Really, nobody did. Nobody believed that this person was capable of what he did. He was an upstanding member of society. His dad was a minister. Um, Everybody liked him. He's a friendly guy. So my mom, realizing that she wasn't the only one being hurt, had enough and broke up with him in that moment. And there's people who direct a lot of hate at my mom, but until you've been in that kind of situation, you really don't understand, what it's like or how difficult it is to leave. Chance of getting killed goes up exponentially the second a woman or a victim decide to leave an intimate partner violence situation. So it's not easy, not to mention the fact that, he controlled all the money. He controlled everything. There was nothing that we had control over in that situation. Um, and we were pretty brainwashed. He did a really good job of manipulating us. So for my mom to see that, I think at first she felt like maybe if she was the only one being hurt, she could deal with it. But when it came to my cousin, she lost it and broke up with him. And then when I felt like it was safe enough, I finally disclosed to her what happened to me. And she was upset. I think she wished that she would have known. She wished that I would have said something. But you have to make decisions sometimes based on survival, right? It may not be the best decision, but it's probably the best decision I could have made to keep us alive.
So between then and now, how has not only yourself but your mom been able to overcome everything and, keep pushing on in life?
Well, it's not easy. I think it's more difficult for my mom. I've done a lot of work on myself. I've done a lot of therapy. My mom's done some. I think we both need a lot more therapy to continue making our lives better. Um, but helping others in this situation really does help me. I think it helps my mom to feel like we're at least doing something positive with this energy. So taking all of that pain and nervousness that we have and fear and channeling it into something like this is really healing. When I interviewed my mom, that was the first time we ever sat down and talked about the case together from start to finish. And I was able to get all my questions answered. She was able to be completely honest and transparent with me. And there was a lot of healing that happened there. But it's a day by day thing. And I think for us, we're not going to stop. Even if John gets arrested and sentenced and, we get what we want, we're still going to keep helping people. We're still going to keep, advocating for people and advocating for change in New Mexico, because there's a lot that's wrong here. There's a lot that needs to be changed.
So are there any efforts from the community or any resources you and your family are currently exploring regarding seeking justice for your baby brother?
Um, well, we're working with the Attorney General. The Attorney General reopened the case in 2021. That was after a campaign that we did to get the attention of the district attorney. The district attorney said that he couldn't handle the case, that it was too much for his office, and so he handed it over to the Attorney General. Um, We have a new attorney general now, so I don't know where we're going to land with him and how he sees the case. I'm hoping that the investigation continues. I'm going to continue talking about it publicly to help build that pressure on them to continue the investigation. My mom and I are actually starting to investigate ourselves, and we're working on a project that I can't really talk about right now, but we are investigating the case ourselves, and we're trying to get more answers than we were able to get from our records request from the police. We're going to try to interview all of the people that were involved. So, the ones that are still alive at least, and see if we can get some more answers into what happened and why the case was never tried. With regards to other community resources, we really haven't explored much of that. We've kind of just been doing it on our own. I am starting a nonprofit, which I'm hoping will help, not necessarily Jacob's case, but other cases where we're going to grant money to family members of murder victims to help with private investigations, DNA testing, burial expenses, awareness campaigns, all that kind of stuff. So that's in the process. We're waiting for the IRS to send us back our 501(c) certificate so we can really start fundraising and helping other families in our community.
That's awesome. I think that's a really good cause that you guys are getting into.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I mean, whatever we can do to help, it's again taking back your power and taking back your voice and using it in a positive way. Sometimes people can come into these situations and they leave and they end up behaving just like the perpetrators that hurt them. And I've always tried to make a conscious effort to act in the opposite of that and to try to help more people that are in that situation.
Right. Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
Where can people find your show and keep up with you on social media?
Yeah. So I have a website, trueconsequences.com. My podcast is pretty much everywhere you listen to podcasts. If you find a place that it's not, let me know and I'll add it. But I think I've done a pretty good job of getting it all the way out there. You can also listen on trueconsequences.com. For social media, you can find me on Twitter at trueconspod, TrueConspod. And on Instagram and Facebook, it's True Consequences Pod.
So before we get out of here, is there anything that you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered yet?
I have another podcast. It's a paranormal podcast. I do it with my good friend Alex. It's called Dos Spookquenos, DOSSPOOKQUENOS, and that's actually a lighter side of my personality. True Consequences can be pretty heavy and pretty serious. So if that's not your speed, I have a fun show called Dos Spookquenos.
Awesome. Well, thank you for giving me your time, and I really appreciate it. And we basically breezed through these questions, but we'll have to do it again in the near future.
Awesome, man. Thanks for inviting me. It's good to see you again.
Unforbidden.